Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jamaica 411. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm your host, Michelle Stern. Now, before we begin our topic, who is to be blamed for what is going on at the University Hospital of the West Indies? I'm going to ask everyone, please, because when you come to Jamaica 411, you're getting quality stuff. So I'm going to ask you, please, to give the video a thumbs up from now on. Please go ahead, give the video a thumbs up, subscribe, and please share. And of course, I want to thank you all in advance. I do appreciate it. Now, many persons have been looking at the Auditor General's report and giving you some information. And they have been doing a fine job also. They have been giving you their opinions, some of which may be way out in left field in my view. For example, I hear Diane Jackson Miller, she talking about kickback. Well, Diane Jackson Miller, as usual, I don't know what is wrong with you of late, but you have a way of interjecting your own views into things that have no basis in fact or evidence. For example, I read the Auditor General's report from cover to cover, and I saw nowhere in that report any mention of kickback. So, how did you come on your program to be mentioning kickback? Maybe kickback. Where did that come from? The Auditor General said something needs to be done to make sure them following the process and the law for procurement, and when them want people for the work, the government said if you put it on them website, all of it, and that is what she's saying, must be done, something must be done about it, or it may heighten the risk for corruption. You hear what I just said? So Diane Jackson Miller needs to show her audience where in the Auditor General's report she mentioned anything about kickback. People may be doing things and they may be doing wrong things, but we don't need to be out there heaping up coal upon them head without any evidence. People are motivated to do things and they do things for all sorts of reasons, and we hope that the Auditor General will get some out of them. But it is not for us to be out there putting our spin on something when the person who did the investigation did not do so. Favors were done to companies. We have no idea at all why and how she could be thinking that maybe kickback involved in that. Me no know. And that is grossly unfair, and she must stop it. Enough of that. So, I am here to give you information. So let us get on with business. So the University Hospital of the West Indies was established by an act that was passed or in any way gazetted on the 26th of November 1948. But the hospital did not come into existence until January 15, 1953. And you remember we told you that when we were looking at Margoling and for him Nancy's story about him daddy? Yes, we told you that already. So you know that. Now, the university now was established as a teaching hospital. A teaching hospital that offers hospital care for patients. It was established in support of the University College of the West Indies, which was set up also in 1948, and I believe they came into effect in that year as well. And it was supposed to, in the long run, become a university standing on its own feet. When they established the university, it had only one faculty, and that was the Faculty of Medicine, because the British at the time felt that we were short of medical professionals in the Caribbean, for them territory, and therefore them wanted to change that and improve that. They decided they want to set up a university, and they chose Jamaica. And the government, I believe, donated the land. I believe it's 100 acres. So that was that. Now, you would have heard or read in the Auditor General's report a reference to what she called board of management, or what they refer to themselves as board of management. Well, with the establishment of the university hospital, there was also established as a corporate body, which means that they register with the Companies Office and the Companies Act. In addition to this act and other acts, then govern how they operate. And what was established was a management board, and it was called the University College Hospital Board of Management. And it was given certain powers. We're going to look at the powers, and then after that, we're going to look at who make up this board and who appoint them. Now, the duties, they had 9 duties or 9 powers given them in the form of duties. And the first one is that they had a duty to construct, equip, furnish, maintain, manage, control, and operate the university hospital, together with all such schools for the training of hospital nurses or hospital technicians of any description as the board may think requisite for ensuring that the university hospital is at all times adequately provided with hospital nurses and technicians. So it is the UHWI that is responsible for the training of the nurses and technicians. The next duty imposed is that they have the power to make all such appointments as may be necessary to enable the duties imposed by paragraph A to be fully and effectually performed. So they have the power to hire who they believe they need to hire in order to carry out those functions. In addition to that, at C it says that they have a duty to prepare and to submit to the minister, not to the parliament, to the minister not later than the 31st day of October in each year, which means every striking year, October 31, a report of the activities of the board. They are also supposed to submit to the minister a financial statement of all receipts and expenditure and a balance sheet. They're talking about the financial statements. And what else it says they should do? In respect of the operations of the board during the previous year, and such report and financial statement together with the audited report. And this is section 5(1)(c) of the law, right? Whatever the law says they should do and they fail to do it, they are in breach. So here we are looking at page 22 of the Auditor General's report, where she examined their records, and she's now making a pronouncement as to whether or not they have been submitting their annual reports, including the audited financial statements, as the law requires. And it says at 2.8, additionally, UHWI's governance practices were inconsistent with its own act, the PBMA Act, and the corporate governance frameworks for public bodies in Jamaica. UHWI breached these regulatory frameworks by failing to submit the required audited financial statements and annual reports to the responsible minister. The last audited financial statements prepared were for the financial year 2018-2019. Last time. However, the stipulated accompanying annual report remained incomplete, so they started it and never finished it. Up to November 2025, UHWI had not submitted annual reports and audited financial statements for 2019-2020 all the way through to 2024-2025. Detailing how approximately $65 billion in subventions were used. The non-submission of these reports by UHWI deprived the portfolio minister and Parliament of their oversight function regarding the financial and operational performance of the hospital. Who is to be blamed for that? The board has a duty under the law to carry out this particular function: the annual reports and the audited financial statements. And in 5 years, they have not done so. So who is it that is responsible for making sure that them do what they're supposed to do? I would expect that at the ministry, it would be the permanent secretary. How is it that the permanent secretary did not realize that this was what was happening? Are the permanent secretaries for these ministries, do they have a schedule that shows them which of these government bodies support to submit their audited reports and annual reports and when, so that they can call them up and say, look, what is going on here, and bring it to the attention of the minister so some kind of action can be taken? So there is obviously a breakdown when it comes to the oversight by the ministries. And this is not the only ministry that has this problem. The government is disjointed, and it really is the permanent secretaries who really need to get themselves more organized than they are at present. The question is, what then happens? Well, usually in these circumstances, not a damn thing happens, more than if the situation is so bad, then the minister changed them out. But I am of the view that the law should be given some teeth so that persons who violate the reporting rules should face some penalties. Once the minister receives these reports, he's supposed to lay them before the parliament. The next duty that they have is to prepare and submit to the minister not later than the 30th day of September in each year, every year, their estimates of revenue and expenditure during the next financial year. So this is a budget now. And then now forget that, because without that, nobody gets paid. Now, it's important that you listen very carefully, because you would have heard Dr. Alfred Dawes saying that the ministry was interfering into the operations of the hospital, as if to say him don't have no say. At 6, it says, once he received the estimates from the board, the hospital board, of the income and expenditure that's supposed to go to the budget, it is the minister that has the responsibility and duty. It says here, the minister shall consider the estimates submitted, and before the 30th of April in each year, approve such estimates either without modification or with such modification as he may think fit. Are you following that? So a duty was also imposed on the minister. He shall, meaning to say, must and bound do what the law says he must do. At section 6.3, it says the board may, subject to such conditions as may be imposed by the minister. Subject to such conditions as may be imposed by the minister applies savings effected or to be effected on any head of their estimates or a surplus of actual overestimated receipts to meet deficiencies on any head, so however that the total expenditure shall not exceed that approved by the minister in such estimates. In other words, once the minister approves the budget for the university hospital, it is their duty to ensure that they don't overspend. If them see them have an issue with one area and them have a surplus somewhere else, them can move the surplus over to that area and shave what they need to shave, but they must not spend more than what the government and the minister approve. That is what I understand that to be saying. So what is the makeup of the board? You go to section 10 and it says the board shall be comprised of 18 members consisting the following: 6 ex officio members. What does that mean? It means it is not the person that is on the board, but actually the position. So anybody who occupies that position, they automatically sit on the board. So the ex officio members is the vice chancellor of the University of the West Indies, supposed to be on that board. The dean of the Faculty of Medicine of the University of the West Indies. That person also sits on the board. Also, the Chief Medical Officer, Jamaica, the Financial Secretary, Jamaica, the Bursar of the University of the West Indies, the Chairman of the Medical Committee of the hospital. Those are the ex officio members, right? You resign, you are off the board. Whoever occupies these positions, they sit on the board. Then now, in addition to those 6 members, you have 4 members elected from time to time by the council of the University of the West Indies. Then we are at 10 now, so the other 8 is now appointed by the minister and consists of the following. And by the way, the minister that we are speaking about here is the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton. So he gets to appoint 8 members, 3 of which must be resident in Jamaica, 1 of whom shall be a registered medical practitioner engaged in private practice. 1 registered medical practitioner appointed on the nomination of the Jamaica Medical Association. So they get to nominate 1 person who is a doctor. And 4 persons, of whom 1 at least shall be a woman, appearing to the minister to be interested in social welfare generally or in the welfare of aftercare of patients attending the hospital. Had the PNP won the election, maybe Mr. Kubita Blood would have been one of them sitting down on this board. So thank goodness for small mercies. And it is the minister who appoints the chairman from among the members. And I do believe that it is the cabinet that does the final approval. So those are the makeup of the 8 persons that the minister should appoint. In addition to the powers that I mentioned before, they also have the power to make standing orders to create bylaws and regulations for the operation of the hospital. And at 7B, it says that they have the power to delegate the performance of any duty imposed or the exercise of any power conferred by or under this act upon the board to a subcommittee composed of so many and such members of the board, or so many or such, if any, persons of other members of the board as the board may appoint. So this committee that they had the power to appoint is called the Finance and General Purposes Committee. At paragraph 2, it says to delegate to the Finance and General Purposes Committee the exercise and performance of all or any of the powers and duties of the board in relation to the management, control, operation of the hospital. So, what have we learned? We have learned that the hospital has a board, a management board, and that board established a committee called the Finance and General Purposes Committee. That committee is carrying out certain functions that the law imposed on the board itself. So the board is not the one that is directly managing the hospital. It is this committee that was set up. Now, what is not in this law? There is no position called Chief Executive Officer. It is not mentioned here, and I'm going to ask the parliamentarians, please amend the law and establish a Chief Executive Officer. It is not illegal to have one because the board has the power to make their own regulations. Another thing I should tell you, that even though they have the power to make the regulations, it has to go to the minister for his approval, and after he approves of it, it then has to be gazetted. So it becomes now some serious matter. Now, the position of Chief Executive Officer would have been created by them because it's not in the law. And I think it should be in the law because with it being in the law, we now have transparency. We now know what is the role of the CEO. As it is now, we have no idea, and we have to consult with the job description to know what it is that he's supposed to be doing. How much of the powers that he was exercising was subject to board approval? We have no clue. So, in order for us to get the information on the role of the CEO in the UHWI, the one that was created, we had to do some search to find where they had advertised for the position. Now, this position was the latest position that was advertised, and the applicants were supposed to have submitted their applications by April 28, 2023, and it was this application that the present CEO, Mr. Fitzgerald Mitchell, was employed under. So the heading of this career opportunity says, applicants are invited to apply for the role of Chief Executive Officer reporting to the board chairman, UHWI. So the first thing we've learned about the role of the CEO is that he does not report to the board. He actually reports to the chairman of the board. So the chairman is responsible for ensuring that he carries out the functions that I'm about to read for you now. It says the role and the person. The UHWI CEO provides top-level leadership, inspiration, vision, and enterprise-wide management, including to lead the day-to-day operations of the university hospital. Then he is described as the accounting officer, and he is to ensure reliable and timely financial management and reporting, as well as prudent management and control of limited resources, decision making, funding, procurement, safety, regulatory, and other compliance. So the job description is clearly stating here that the CEO is the accounting officer, and as part of his duty, he is to ensure that the procurement regulations are carried out, and he's also to ensure safety, regulatory, and other compliance. He's to ensure that the hospital is compliant. He is also the one that is responsible for preparing financial statements and the reports that the law requires the board to submit every year to the minister. So the board has delegated these responsibilities under the law to the CEO and not to the committee. What is even more stark by what is written here is that the CEO is to report to the chairman and not to the committee. So the committee can exercise no control over what he does. In any event, that is what one would expect. Now, you would have heard Dr. Dawes talking about the hiring of a woman from England, first rate. Well, this would have been the advertisement that was put out. And she declined the job, according to him, and the university instead hired Fitzgerald Mitchell, who was already in the university system. He was here for years. Recall what they said at the very beginning is the role of the CEO. It says the UHWI CEO provides top-level leadership, inspiration, vision, and enterprise-wide management, including executing hospital development projects and strategic initiatives with best-in-class project management. Project management. So he is the one, it seems to me, that is responsible for the projects. He is supposed to be the project manager. He's supposed to be the one negotiating. What is he negotiating? Must be the contracts, prices, right? And so on. And he is the one that is supposed to ensure that the projects are completed on time and within budget. And in all of that, he is to make sure that the university hospital is in compliance with the public accountability standards. Has he fulfilled his duty in that regard? And if he has not, why is he still there? So, when we look at the matter of the University Hospital of the West Indies and what went down as described in the Auditor General's report, the question of who is to be blamed may lie in the structure, how it was set up in the first place. For example, the ex officio members of the board, they are hospital operatives who were employed to carry out the functions of patient care. What management skills do they have? And when they were employed to the university, knowing that they will also be sitting on the board of the hospital, was there a requirement that these persons have some kind of management skills? You follow what I'm saying? Because it may turn out that the failures that was described in the Auditor General's report was stemming from the board and its oversight of what it is the CEO that they gave all this power to was doing. Maybe the system needs to be looked at from that angle. Maybe the system failures may be due to the fact that the board set up a CEO, which is not a wrong decision. You need somebody to manage all the areas of an organization from day to day. And so when they created the CEO, they did the right thing. The question is, how do they place the CEO in the already existing system? Where do they place him? And who is it that he's supposed to report to? And it seems to me that the reporting should have been made to the management committee, the committee that was set up to carry out the functions of the board. That's where he should have been reporting to. And then they would now have made sure that he followed the law when it comes to compliance. You follow what I'm saying? So, where is the blame to be laid? It could well be in the system and how it is set up. It created a situation where the CEO had powers and no effective way of controlling what he did. If he was not to report to the committee that was set up to carry out the functions and powers of the board, then he should have reported directly to the board. What they did was to make him report to the chairman, and it seemed as if somewhere along the line, some breakdown took place there. It also seems to me that the job description of the CEO conflicted with the procurement law. And I tell you why. Because it says that he is the one who should be the project manager or responsible for the projects, and he is the one to negotiate. While at the same time, the procurement laws set out a set of procedures to follow when buying goods and services, and that did not include the negotiation by any CEO. My understanding of the process they should follow when it comes to procurement is that first of all, they must identify a need. The management and the board determined they need 51 laptops. That's supposed to go to a committee that will be set up in order to determine the specs and what they believe it will cost for these laptops. Next step is to determine the procurement policy they're going to follow. Will it be competitive bidding, restrictive bidding, or direct sourcing? Which one they choose depends on the value and whether or not there's an emergency. If there's no emergency, it goes to competitive bidding, which means that they're supposed to put the invitation to bid on the government website. I think it's called GoJeb. After that, the bids come in, it goes to an evaluation committee, which is then set up for that purpose. They ensure that the bids conform with the specifications outlined in the tender, and then they make recommendations. That is the process as I understand it. That is to say, the government's procurement procedure. When there's an approval, my understanding of how purchasing works is that there's a requisition for the item or the service. After that, a purchase order is drafted, and that purchase order is given to the supplier of either the goods or the service. And it is from there that they supply the goods or service according to the specifications that is required. They supply within the time frame, they send their invoice, Somebody in the UHWI must sign off on that invoice that they receive the goods in good order. If it's a service, that the service was completed satisfactorily. The invoice then goes for approval for payment. They collect them check and then go about their business. And that is that where that transaction is concerned. This process that I just described to you, from requisition to the payment of the invoice, is known as the accounting process. And this is a process that every entity is supposed to follow, whether they are a private company or they're a government entity, whenever it is that they are seeking to acquire goods or services. And it is to this accounting process that the government added the procurement process that I had described before. And that involves the setting up of two committees and a mechanism for accepting proposals from suppliers. And that is what we call now the bidding process. That I understand is the entire process. What evidently has been happening is that the procurement side, with the evaluation and the assessment and the specification, those were not always done. It was done in some instances, but not all the time. If these committees were not set up to determine the price and specifications, as well as the evaluation of the bids that came in, then the $1 million question is, who was it that was determining the specifications of these laptops? And who was it that was determining whether the goods that came in met the specifications of what was required? Who determined that? Because evidently somebody was making that decision. It's just that they were not following the law and the process that the law says that should be followed. But that is one problem. But the main problem is the problem of whether or not we're getting value for money. The sole sourcing, which means that they did not go to competitive bidding. They simply have a man that came and did the electrical work. Let's call them the Electrical Man Company Limited. And they decided that they liked the work that Mr. Biggs did. And so every time them have an electrical problem, that's who they call. Him give them an invoice, them give him a check, and him go about them business. It is the exact precise way companies operate. But this is not a private company. It is a government entity. And there are rules for them to follow, which they must follow. So when it came to the failure to follow the procurement procedures, it is the CEO who should accept blame for that, because it was he who had the responsibility given to him by the board to ensure that while he's carrying out his duties, he should follow the procurement rules and whatever other rules that applies to them. So now that we understand what's going on, when we look now at the Auditor General's report, we're looking out for two things. One, whether or not they abided by the procurement rules, and two, whether or not they had abided by the accounting rules. And it's the accounting rules that really have the checks and balances in it. When we look at the Auditor General's report, the findings of the Auditor General, the first one is the absence of strategic documents and procurement planning. And so they had failed to submit procurement plans, providing only 2 out of 7 from 2018 to 2025. That's what she's saying here. Second is in non-compliance with GOJEP portal requirements. And GOJEP is a website that was established by the Ministry of Finance for the government entities, all of them, to send their request for bids, where companies can go on that site and see if there's anything there for them to bid on. The whole idea is to promote transparency in the government procurement procedures. The third thing the Auditor General found was an absence of procurement documentation. Next is the misuse of the tax exempt status. Then there was what she called after the fact procurement activities. And that one is very interesting. And I think I have an idea as to what may have been going on there. Then there was the use of private wing for procurement. she had a problem with that as well. And then she found other procurement irregularities. So she found 7 issues when she went in. It was a whistleblower. Somebody pinched her and told her that she need to come in, come look at what been going on at UHWI with this procurement policy. Why it is that they did not pinch the board, and the board chairman, who happened to have been somebody who is from the private sector, would suggest that the whistleblower don't trust the board for some reason, right? Then trust the Auditor General instead. And sure enough, the Auditor General jumped on it and went in and did her examination of the books. And she came up with some very interesting findings, which you would have been hearing for days now. The part of the Auditor General's report that I find most interesting and intriguing is the improper use of UHWI's tax exemption status. You would have heard a lot about it, and Mas Cliff would have discussed it with you. After the Auditor General got the tip and she moved in to do her audit, she had requested of the Jamaica Customs Agency customs entry forms for all items that were imported by the UHWI, dating from January 2019 to February of 2025. And what they found was that there were 2,991 import entries. Surprisingly, what she found that these 2,991 import entries bore the name of the UHWI private wing. What is a private wing? It is a Tony Thwaites wing. And it says here the University Hospital of the West Indies private wing, known affectionately as the Tony Thwaites Wing, is a 54-bed non-profit healthcare facility and is the private wing of the University Hospital of the West Indies. So, any reference in the Auditor General's report to the private wing of the UHWI, they're talking about the Tony Thwaites Wing. So instead of being provided with the customs entry for the UHWI, what the Auditor General got was the custom entries for the Tony Thwaites Wing. And what this meant was that the UHWI was not directly importing items. They were importing it through the Tony Thwaites Wing, and the Auditor General had a problem with that. Now, the Tony Thwaites Wing it's a private, you want to go there, so you have to pay money for everything, right? Although they describe it as non-profit, but it is an arm of the UHWI for people who have money and don't want to go jam up with a whole lot of people on a ward and then get these private rooms and so on and so on and so forth. Yes. So they had imported $4.9 billion in value of items for UHWI. And what they imported were like equipment, medical supplies, pharmaceutical products, and other goods. And they imported them for the UHWI. Now, on the customs entry, the customs duty amounted to $1.5 billion, of which $1.4 billion, or 97%, was given as tax relief because the law says, and we're talking about the University Hospital Act of 1948, it says that the items coming through the wharf is supposed to be customs duty free. And GCT for any items that they purchase is 0 rated. So that is why 97% was given as relief, which meant that the remaining 3% went towards paying other customs fees, including the customs broker, etc. Somebody in the UHWI took the decision to use the tax exemption to benefit private companies. But what I found most egregious is where it says additional cost of $1.9 million was incurred by the UHWI. In other words, they went and they claimed that the goods is for their use and made that declaration. And because of that, the customs did not charge the company or charge the UHWI any customs duty. The goods never went to the UHWI because it was never intended for them. It went to the private company. But because it went through the UHWI system, they had to now pay $1.9 million out of the money that the government gave them to use to buy equipment and medication and all of that for the patients. Now you imagine that they give a benefit that is costing the taxpayers, yes, but when they took $1.9 million out of the budget to pay the customs duty and then go back to the company to recover it, I find that most egregious. You follow what I'm saying? Now, that seems to me that somebody should get locked up for it. But that sounds like thieving to me. There is no indication from the Auditor General that they had gone back to get the money from that company. They were supposed to only give them a benefit or bestow on them an opportunity for them to get a benefit. How the hell it come about that them taking the taxpayers' money now to pay for the entry, right? And not go back go get the money from the people. Somebody should be arrested for this. So we are going to search through the Auditor General's report to see who it was that had approved this. It says here it was 6.6 million tax waiver for company one, private company one. So we're going to look now to see who approved it. It was a laundry equipment. We're going to look at this one case and we're going to have to come with a second video because this is already long. So when the Auditor General on May 13 made a formal request to the UHWI asking about the equipment, them want to see the equipment that them said them buy, right? The CEO responded on May 26, 2025. That is Mr. Fitzgerald Mitchell. He confirmed that the UHWI facilitated the transaction through its contract and administration unit. In the next episode, part 2, we're going to be looking at the Auditor General's report with respect to this contract and administration unit to see what it is, if anything, we may discover. According to the CEO, this unit, the contract and administration unit, requested checks for customs services required for clearance. So somebody gave the instruction, right, that this is what must be done. And when it came to the payment of the $1.9 million, the contract and administration unit requested checks to go pay it. That's what he's explaining, right? The CEO further stated that the equipment was purchased by the private company and that there were no procurement or payment records held by UHWI for these items, nor were they included in the UHWI's inventory records because it never went there. It was never intended for them. It was intended for the private company so that they don't have to pay the $6.6 million in customs duty. But the $1.9 million, which had to be paid for other customs expenses, was actually paid by the UHWI, and they never went back to the company for the money. So what they were really doing was facilitating certain private companies to bypass the customs duty that they're supposed to pay. Tax evasion, it would appear to me. But it never costed them any money, except in this one instance. And they never went back to the company for the money. Mr. Mitchell, why is that? Why you never go back for the money? This is not your private money, sir. This is not your private business. It happened under your watch. For what purpose did you allow? Because it had to be you who approved the $1.9 million in payment. You are the CEO. And if you did Why is it you never go back for the money? What is the nature of your relationship with this company? Now, I don't expect you to tell us because I'm sure your lawyers will be advising you not to open your mouth and say nothing because it can end up in a court. But, I don't understand you at all. How the hell did you expect that this was going to go unnoticed? And even if your argument is going to be that somebody else gave you instruction to do it, you had no obligation to follow an illegal order. You could not be that weak. And for all intents and purposes, you're definitely stupid. Look at all the problems now you get yourself into. Mash up your reputation and your beautiful career. You should not have taken the job in the first place. You should have stayed where you were. That's what it amounts to. Now, another question is this the only time and under your watch that this happened? Or did it happen before and you inherited a culture that you believe you needed to continue? Let us look now and see when the incident occurred. And this is where it gets even stranger. At paragraph 1.1.5, the import declaration document was dated December 28, 2023. And it was reflecting the 23rd wing as the importer and consignee, with the former CEO of UHWI as the person responsible for financial settlement. It went on to say that the bill of lading named the UHWI as a consignee and notifying party, and that indicates, according to the Auditor General, that they were declaring that they had legal ownership and responsibility for the goods. Additionally, an undated declaration letter from the UHWI, which must be produced in order for the duty-free status to be observed, featured the name and signature of the former CEO. The Customs C-84 declaration, dated December 28, 2023, also displayed the name and stamped signature of the same former CEO, despite the fact that his employment ended on November 1, 2022. So he resigned, gone about in business, probably doing another job, maybe enjoying in life, and here is his name appearing on customs document, right? And on the declaration itself that the goods in question were for the UHWI use, and therefore they are requesting that they not bother charge the customs duty upon them. Now, that may look fishy, but I think I have an explanation, and I will have to do that in the next episode, part 2, as to how it is that it is a former CEO whose signature ended up on these documents, right? But it clearly did not happen while he was there. 2023, 1 year after him gone. So how is it that his name get on these documents when he gone about in business? Let me leave it here, and then I'll return with part 2, and I will then explain what it is that I believe happened, and I will also discuss the other aspects of the Auditor General's report, which I think is of interest that I would like to bring to your attention. The rest of it you would have heard from other people ad nauseum. So I want to thank you for joining me today. Remember, please, to give the video a thumbs up, share the video, and subscribe if you have not yet done so, and feel free to leave your comments in the comment section. Until next time, take very good care of yourselves and walk good.